So when we talk about consciousness, it really does feel deceptively simple, doesn't it?
It really does. I
Yep.
mean, it's just what leaves you when you go to sleep at night.
And hopefully comes back in the morning.
Right, mercifully,
Mhm.
as William James put it. But that simplicity hides, well, maybe the biggest mystery there is.
The world not, some call it.
Exactly. How does physical stuff, matter and energy buzzing around in our heads, somehow give rise to subjective experience, feelings, thoughts, imagination?
How does matter become imagination? That's really the core question for this deep dive, isn't it?
It is. We're digging into sources that try to map out that material basis, looking for the specific neural setups needed for our inner world to actually happen.
Okay, but before we jump into the neuroscience, we probably need to acknowledge the philosophical background here. It looms pretty large.
Oh, absolutely. You can't really talk about mind and matter without bumping into Descartes, right?
Mm-hmm.
His big split from, what, 400 years ago?
Rene Descartes, yeah. He sliced reality neatly in two.
He did. You had res extensive physical stuff, things that take up space, follow physical laws.
And then res cogitans, the thinking stuff. Consciousness. Mind. Not physical, not spatial. Pure dualism.
And modern neuroscience, well, the sources we're looking at, they basically start from the opposite assumption. Materialism.
Meaning consciousness arises from the physical stuff, from the material order.
Right. It's assumed to emerge from the complexity of certain organisms. But, and this is a really crucial but in these sources, it's not just the brain locked away in the skull. Higher brain functions, the kind we associate with rich consciousness, they seem to absolutely require ongoing interaction with the world and, importantly, with other people.
Okay, so it's embodied and embedded materialism, maybe.
Sort of, yeah.
Mm.
But even if we grant that the brain's the source, there's this nagging counter-argument,
Mm.
epiphenomenalism.
Huxley's analogy. I love this one.
The steam whistle, right.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, epiphenomenalism suggests consciousness might just be a byproduct, something thrown off by all the complex brain activity, but completely ineffective itself.
Like the steam whistle on an old locomotive, it makes a lot of noise.
Draws attention, sure, but it has zero actual influence on the engine, on what makes the train move.
Yeah.
It's just there.
But if consciousness is just a useless whistle, that leads to a really tricky spot scientifically, doesn't it?
A massive paradox.
Yeah.
Okay, think about discriminating light from dark. When we do it, it feels like something. There's a subjective experience.
Right.
But a simple light detector, or even just neurons in our retina making that same discrimination, well, we don't assume they're conscious. Why the difference?
It can't just be about what discrimination is happening or even where exactly.
Exactly. It forces you to think it's not about the location or the neuron itself. It must be about the process, how that activity fits into a bigger picture.
Okay, so if it's about process, we need to know what consciousness fundamentally does. What are its key features? The sources seem to boil it down to three main things.
They do. First up is privateness.
That internal subjective quality. What it feels like to be you, seeing red or feeling pain.
Qualia, precisely. It's your private theater. Second is unity and coherence. Integration.
Meaning our experience isn't just a jumble of separate sensations, it hangs together.
Right. You don't consciously register 1 and then separately 7. You just see 17. It's unified.
And the brain fights to keep it unified too.
Oh, definitely. Think about those split brain studies. When you cut the connections linking the two hemispheres.
The corpus callosum.
Right. Suddenly, trying to do two simple separate tasks with each hand becomes possible. But in a normal brain, the system often forces those two tasks into one much harder, unified task. Unity demands coherence.
Like looking at one of those ambiguous figures, the Necker cube.
Perfect example. You can see it one way or the other way, but not both at once. Your brain picks one interpretation and suppresses the other to keep things coherent. Fusion or suppression.
Okay, so privateness, unity. What's the third property?
Informativeness. Or differentiation. This is about the sheer number of different conscious states we can distinguish between. Billions, potentially.
And this is where we leave, say, a fancy camera way behind.
Absolutely. Imagine a high-end scanner registers the number 1, then it registers 1 again, but this time a fire alarm is blaring.
For the scanner, the input 1 is identical.
But for us, those are two vastly different conscious states. The one is contextualized by the alarm, the potential danger, the urgency. Our repertoire of distinguishable states is just immense, orders of magnitude beyond any machine.
Yet, paradoxically, at any given moment, our conscious awareness seems really limited. Like, we can only juggle a few things at once.
That's the famous 7 ± 2 chunks idea. roughly. And yeah, it seems like a contradiction, this vast potential, but this narrow bottleneck in the moment.
Why the limit?
Well, the sources suggest it's the price you pay for unity and coherence. You simply can't integrate billions of different things meaningfully all at once. You have to narrow the focus.
And that integration takes time, right? That conscious processing delay.
Yeah, roughly 100 to 500 milliseconds. That's the psychological refractory period. Conscious choice itself is the bottleneck.
Okay. So to get that unified, coherent, yet highly informative experience, you need some serious hardware.
Which brings us to the brain itself. The scale is just hard to grasp.
It really is. We're talking, what, 100 billion neurons and maybe a million billion synapses connections between them.
A million billion.
If you counted one synapse every second, nonstop, it would take you about 32 million years to finish.
That's wow. And the number of possible ways they could be wired up.
It's basically 10 followed by at least a million zeros. It's hyper-astronomical. It dwarfs the number of particles in the known universe.
So how on earth does something that complex organize itself to produce, useful behavior instead of just noise? It can't be like a pre-programmed computer chip.
Definitely not. The sources argue against that kind of instructionism, fixed codes, or algorithms. Instead, the brain operates by selectionism. Think neural Darwinism. Selection, like evolution, but inside the head.
In a way, yes. It happens in two main phases. First, during developmental selection. Early on, there's massive variability created in how neurons connect. The basic rule is kind of neurons that fire together, wire together.
Which means everyone's initial wiring is unique.
Fundamentally, yes. No two brains start out identical. Then, throughout life, you have experiential selection.
Learning, basically.
Right. Based on your experiences, on what works and what doesn't, the strength of those synapses change. Some get stronger, some weaker. It's constantly adapting.
And what knits this whole selectionist system together? You mentioned integration earlier.
The key structural feature, probably the most unique thing about higher brains, is reentry.
Okay, what's reentry?
It's massive parallel reciprocal connections between different brain areas, different maps. Think of constant two-way signaling. That huge bundle connecting the hemispheres, the corpus callosum, is a prime example.
So it's like different departments constantly talking back and forth, checking in.
That's a good way to put it. Reentry is how you achieve integration across specialized areas. And because the system is selectional and reentrant, it has this really interesting property called degeneracy.
Degeneracy, that sounds bad.
Yeah, the name's a bit counterintuitive. But it's actually crucial. It means that structurally different components, different neural circuits, can end up producing the same output or function.
Wait, so I could lift my arm using one set of pathways, and you could lift yours using a completely different set, but the result is the same.
Exactly. Degeneracy gives the system incredible robustness. If one pathway gets damaged, often other structurally different pathways can achieve the same result. It's not reliant on one single fixed circuit for a function.
That is wild. It makes you think about trying to repair brain damage. If there's no single right circuit, how do you fix it?
It's a huge challenge for medicine, absolutely. It points towards needing really personalized approaches. You can't just look for the memory circuit. But okay, what keeps this variable degenerate system from just going haywire?
There have to be some constraints, right?
Right. The system needs values. Not moral values, but built-in constraints that guide selection towards adaptive outcomes.
Like reflexes, maybe? Stuff hardwired by evolution?
That's part of it. But really important are the brain's diffuse value systems. Think of areas like the locus coeruleus. They spray neuromodulators, chemicals like norepinephrine, across vast regions of the brain.
And what did those chemicals do?
They essentially signal importance, salience, novelty, reward, threat, things the organism needs to pay attention to. They bias which synaptic connections get stronger or weaker during learning. They help shape behavior to be adaptive.
Okay, so we've got this hyper-complex, selectionist, reentrant, degenerate system guided by values. This leads us, I think, to the core mechanism proposed in the sources for consciousness itself, the dynamic core hypothesis.
That's right. But first, it's worth remembering just how much of our mental life is actually unconscious.
Right, all the automatic stuff.
Exactly. Like an expert pianist playing scales without thinking, or how you automatically check grammar as you speak. These are practiced routines, often involving fewer brain regions than when you were first learning them. They've become automated.
There's that CEO analogy, right?
Yeah, the conscious self is like the CEO. It asks for a result, solve this problem, or play this passage. And the unconscious routines, the staff, deliver the answer without the CEO needing to know all the intricate steps involved.
Delegation to the unconscious makes things efficient.
Hugely efficient. But conscious choice, dealing with novelty, integrating new information that remains the bottleneck, taking time.
So back to the dynamic core, what is it, according to this hypothesis?
Crucially, it's a process, not a fixed place. It's a functional cluster of neurons, mostly in the thalamocortical system, the thalamus and cortex interacting.
A functional cluster, meaning it's defined by what it's doing.
Precisely. And for this cluster to be the seat of consciousness at any given moment, it has to meet two demanding criteria simultaneously, over timescales of hundreds of milliseconds.
Okay, what are they?
First, high integration. The neuronal groups within the cluster have to be interacting strongly and rapidly. Lots of reentrant signaling, high mutual information exchange. They have to be functionally connected, talking to each other intensely.
And second,
High differentiation. The cluster's activity has to be highly complex and informative. It needs to be capable of assuming a huge number of different states. We can measure this statistically as complexity.
so it's this balance. Highly connected, but also highly varied and changing activity. Not just synchronized, but complex.
That's the sweet spot. Integration and differentiation. Lose that balance, and consciousness fades even if the brain isn't silent.
Like in deep sleep, or a seizure.
Exactly. In both those states, you often see highly integrated activity. The EEG might show big synchronized waves across the brain. But that activity has very low complexity. All the neurons are basically doing the same thing in lockstep.
The repertoire of possible states collapses.
Right. The system loses its differentiation, its ability to make fine distinctions, and consciousness disappears. The key is activity that's both interconnected and constantly changing in complex, differentiated patterns.
Okay, that makes sense for the on-off switch. But what about the feeling itself, the subjective part, qualia? How does a dynamic core explain, say, the feeling of red?
Well, the idea is that qualia aren't simple tags. They're these high-dimensional discriminations made by the core.
High dimensional.
Yeah, think of a vast state space for the brain, an n-dimensional space, where n is the number of interacting neuronal groups in the core, maybe thousands, maybe millions. A specific quale, like the feeling of pure red, corresponds to a particular point or region in that incredibly complex space.
So redness isn't just the firing of red neurons in the visual cortex.
Not at all. That feeling, that quale of red, is defined by the combined state of all the groups currently active in the dynamic core. That includes neurons responding to color, yes, but also form, motion, maybe touch, your sense of your body's position, body schema, memories associated with red, your current emotional state. The whole integrated pattern defines the quality.
The entire state of the core determines the specific feel. Wow. Okay, what about memory? If consciousness depends on this dynamic process, where does memory fit? Is it like a file we pull up?
The selectionist view argues strongly against memory as simple storage or retrieval of a fixed record. It's seen as non-representational.
Non-representational, so not like a computer's hard drive at all.
Not really. Memory in this view is the acquired ability of the system, thanks to those synaptic changes from experiential selection, to repeat or suppress a mental or physical act. It's recreating something, not retrieving it.
Recreating it, how does that work?
There's a great metaphor used in the sources. Think of a glacier. Water melts, flows down in rivulets, and might refreeze. The next time water flows, the overall output stream might look the same behavior, the same recollection. But the specific rivulets carrying the water, the exact neural pathways activated, could be quite different depending on the current state of the ice, the context.
So memory is constructive. We rebuild it each time, using circuits shaped by past experience, but not necessarily the exact same circuits every time.
Exactly. It's recategorical, not replicative.
Yeah.
Which fits much better with how fallible and context-dependent our memories actually are.
That makes sense. And this constructive ability underlies consciousness itself.
Yes, particularly when we distinguish between two levels. First, there's primary consciousness. This is what we likely share with many mammals and birds.
What does that involve?
It's the ability to build an integrated mental scene in the present. It connects ongoing perception with past value-laden experiences, creating what the sources call a remembered present. Aware, but tied to the now.
And then there's the next level up.
Higher order consciousness.
Huh.
This really blossoms in humans, largely thanks to language and semantic ability.
This is where a sense of self comes in, being aware that you are aware.
Precisely. And crucially, it involves the ability to explicitly model the past and the future as concepts, to mentally time travel, plan, reflect. It frees us, to some extent, from being locked into that immediate, remembered present.
This has been, well, A really deep dive into some incredibly complex ideas about how our brains might generate our minds. Let's try to pull out the main takeaways from these sources. They're quite counterintuitive in places.
Okay, first big one. Selection precedes logic. The way the brain works, its evolutionary and developmental principles based on selection. These are more fundamental, ontologically prior, than the rules of logic that humans invented later. The brain is adaptive first, logical second.
Good point. Second.
Being is not describing. No matter how complete our scientific description of the brain state's underlying consciousness becomes, that description can never be the same as the subjective experience itself.
Knowing all about the neurons firing isn't the same as feeling the pain or seeing the sunset.
Exactly. Embodiment, having that functioning dynamic core, seems to be the price of admission for qualia.
And finally, the core message. Consciousness isn't magic. It arises from very specific, very subtle, very complex material arrangements and processes in the brain.
That dynamic core process, needing both high integration and high differentiation, driven by selection and reentry, that seems to be the key mechanism identified.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Thinking clearly requires consciousness. But what about other kinds of meaningful relations we experience, things like understanding poetry or appreciating art or judging complex social situations?
Do these kinds of meaning, resting as they do on unique personal histories, ambiguities, context, and maybe even incomparable singular experiences, are they fundamentally unfit for complete scientific study? Do they represent a limit, perhaps, to what science alone can capture about the conscious mind?